Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the marble corridors and mosaic-floored villas of ancient Rome, not as senators or gladiators, but as someone much less remembered, the overworked, underthanked, and absolutely indispensable Roman household slave. Don't worry, you won't be thrown to the lions tonight, but you may be asked to refill a few oil lamps. Before dawn, while barefoot imagine it now your day begins in the pre-dawn dark, the city still dreaming under its low-hanging mist. The villa around you sleeps, silent but expectant. You're already up. You're a lamp slave, one of the many enslaved people whose sole responsibility is to make sure every oil lamp in this household is lit, trimmed, cleaned, and gently glowing by the time the master yawns into his grape-scented sponge bath. So, you shuffle quietly through the halls, cradling a wicker basket filled with spare wicks, a clay pot of olive oil, and a bent bronze pick for cleaning out soot. The lamps are delicate things, some shaped like dolphins or tiny winged cupids, and if you crack one, well, you'd better hope nobody notices. Not that anyone ever thanks you when you do it right. You pass through the atrium first, lighting the central hanging lamp, then down toward the triclinium, the dining room. It's a rhythm. Tip the oil, set the wick, spark the flame. One after another, by the time the family begins stirring, you've already trimmed 40 lamps, smeared soot on your tunic, and earned the early morning honor of being utterly invisible. Except if you missed one. Then suddenly you're the most noticed person in the villa. Such is the joy of your role. Historians still argue whether some lamp slaves were rotated with other household roles or kept strictly to this job for life. What's clear is that the position was weirdly specialized, like having an in-house electrician who only works in candles. And don't forget the candelabrum porter, a close cousin to the lamp slave tasked with adjusting, cleaning, and sometimes dancing with towering candelabras during feasts. Because, apparently, that was a thing. Your master, by the way, prefers a certain oil blend, imported stuff from Hispania. Thick, slow-burning, with a faint aroma of bay leaf. You don't dare forget. You made that mistake last week and got an earful about the scent of provincial markets. You duck into the kitchen briefly, where the cook is still snoring beside a sack of chickpeas. You refill your oil jug, relight your main taper, and move toward the family's private quarters. The domus is waking now. Someone is already grumbling about sandals. Somewhere else, a child demands a honey cake. And you, still quiet as a shadow, reach up to adjust a flickering flame above the master's writing desk. One charred wick, one soft glow, one quiet sigh of relief. It's oddly beautiful, in a way. You make the villa feel alive. And then there's the sun. You step briefly into the courtyard as a shaft of golden morning light breaks over the tiled rooftops. It's soft, warm, and entirely too late. You've already been working for 3 hours. You allow yourself a moment, just one, to breathe in the petrichor scent of watered stone and blooming myrtle. Then you're back inside. The mistress wants her perfume burner lit. The library lamp is sputtering. And someone spilled honey into the guest room lantern. Again. Sometimes you dream of fireflies. They seem less demanding. Still, you take a strange pride in it. Because when the master's important guests arrive, and the lamps cast their dancing glow across polished marble and painted frescoes, no one says a word. But you know they're comfortable. You know they see everything just clearly. Enough. That's your work. Your quiet, oily masterpiece. And maybe tonight, if the feast runs long and the wine flows freely, someone will drunkenly stumble into a pillar and blame the shadows. You'll smile to yourself in the dark because you lit every single lamp, every single one. Your hands still smell faintly of soot and olive oil as you pass off your basket and move into the outer vestibule, just in time to see another group of slaves assume their stations. These ones, though, They don't polish, cook, or clean. They stand out and stand out and stand out. Welcome to the noble art of human coat racks. Or more politely, the vestibular slaves. Their job, if you can call it that, is to remain perfectly motionless near the villa entrance, cloaked in fine but subdued tunics, waiting to collect cloaks, hats, walking sticks, and occasionally the egos of arriving guests. You join them for a while just to rest. Not that anyone officially lets you, but nobody notices you've sat on the steps for a moment. It's still early. The first dignitary of the day hasn't yet made his dramatic entrance. One of the cloak bearers, a boy of 12 with sleepy eyes and a tunic 2 sizes too big, leans over and whispers, "Yesterday, someone tried to tip me." He grins. I pretended not to understand. That's the joke. Of course, there are no tips in this job. Just a lot of standing around while wealthy visitors shrug off their togas and shout at their drivers to remember the wine crate. Still, if you're assigned here, you're lucky in some strange way. These jobs are close to the master's door, inside the visual field of visiting nobility. If you're clever, polite, and excellently invisible, you might get noticed in the way household slaves sometimes hoped for. You might be given a better job, like washing the dogs. One man enters, theatrical as a summer storm, tossing his cloak with a flare that nearly smothers the small slave reaching to catch it. The boy stumbles, catches himself, and folds the heavy wool garment over his arms with the precision of someone who's done this 1,000 times. And he probably has thought it's not just cloaks. Oh no, sometimes you hold scrolls. Sometimes walking. Canes. A particularly eccentric senator once had you hold his peacock feather fan for nearly an hour while he lectured about river irrigation. Your arm fell asleep. Your soul did, too. Historians still argue whether these vestibular roles were a kind of live display of wealth-like human furniture, or if they genuinely served a useful function in traffic management. After all, in grand Roman households, there could be dozens of arrivals per hour during peak feasting season. One scroll from Pompeii details a household with 5 cloak holders and a dedicated garland retriever. Let that one swirl in your mind for a bit. You glance over at an older slave assigned to the wall post. He's balancing a tray of visiting cards on one hand and chewing a piece of mint to stay awake. He catches your eye, shrugs subtly, and returns to statue mode. Sometimes guests arrive with unexpected accessories, musical instruments, pet monkeys, oversized birthday gifts shaped like ships. All of it must be accepted, held, logged, if important, and above all, never dropped. Ever. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't sit. You don't lean against the painted wall. You don't sneeze. You just wait. It's a strange form of stillness, half performance, half punishment, all very Roman. Because even in doing nothing, you're doing something. You're signaling order, submission, elegance, restraint. You are the first impression the master makes. At a certain point, the light shifts. The guests are inside. The doors close. For a few fleeting hours, the vestibular slaves are released, some to water duty, some to carry notes, some to help fetch last-minute items like a forgotten perfume jar or someone's sandals. But for now, you stay. A cart arrives, a traveling guest. From Sicily, wearing too many rings and a mood made of thunderclouds. He tosses his fur-lined cape into your arms and mutters something about dinner being late. You nod once, fold the garment, and silently pray he forgets to ask for it back. It's warm, and smells faintly of citrus. Your shift ends when the last guest leaves, or when you're summoned elsewhere. Today, it's the former. You're still here when dusk softens the edges of the marble and cools the tiles under your aching feet. One guest, red-faced from wine, returns to collect his umbrella. Not that it's raining, but it's a mark of Status now, imported from Britannia. Ivory handle. Useless for actual weather. Still, you bow as you hand it back. You've held cloaks of governors, philosophers, generals, and once, maybe, a gladiator turned poet. You've held secrets too, the quiet glances between guests, the urgent whispers before a feast. But mostly, you've held wool, and you're good at it. The guests are inside now. Voices carry faintly from the atrium laughter, the polite clink of bronze cups, someone misquoting Virgil. You leave the vestibule behind and head down a corridor lined with busts of long-dead ancestors, noses chipped, eyes blank. Past the kitchen smoke and the bustle of bread boys darting like ants with trays. You're on your way to a quieter world where ink flows instead of wine. Welcome to the domain of the library scribes, scroll fetchers, and the underappreciated. Librarians of Rome's upper class. Not every slave had to be literate, but if you were, and especially if you could write in more than one language, you were a precious asset. Which also meant more work. Lucky you went to the study, a cool chamber lined with wooden shelves full of rolled scrolls, each tagged with little ivory labels. Some belonged to the master's private collection copies of Cicero's letters, Pliny's treatises, perhaps a fragment of Homer's Odyssey annotated by some long-forgotten schoolmaster with a dramatic flair for doodling. Your job? Keep them. Organized, dusted, and ready at a moment's notice. If the master wants a specific passage from Seneca's musings on melancholy goats, you'd better know which corner it's curled up in. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, ruins a patrician's morning like delayed wisdom, but the real fun begins when he dictates. He leans back in his chair, feet tucked into embroidered slippers, and starts talking. Sometimes in Latin, sometimes Greek, sometimes that weird blend of both that no one but him understands. Your job is to transcribe it all flawlessly on wax tablet or parchment, while balancing on a creaky stool that wobbles like political stability during the year of the 4 emperors. Note the phrasing, he says, stabbing the air with a ringed finger. I want the heart of Rome lies not in her walls, but in her wine. That's good, isn't it? You nod, even though it's not. Sometimes you serve as editor, sometimes ghostwriter, occasionally speech coach. You've rewritten love poems for him, corrected his spelling. You once politely removed the word dog-hearted from a diplomatic letter. Historians still argue whether enslaved scribes had any authorship claim on the texts they transcribed or edited. A few scholars believe some famous Roman writers particularly. The prolific ones had silent scribes shaping their ideas behind the curtain. But of course, no one thanked the curtain. You're not just a scribe, though. You're also a scroll wrangler. If a guest arrives and wants to discuss poetry, because that's a totally normal way to spend a dinner, you're the one who retrieves the requested verse. And it's never the one at eye level. It's always that awkward scroll wedged behind 3 others on the top shelf, written in cursive so tight it makes your temples throb. You lug a wooden footstool over, muttering under your breath in Greek, and reach up with both hands to retrieve the dusty tube. You blow gently along the edge, never too hard, or the ancient papyrus might disintegrate. You remember the last time that happened. The master made you recopy the entire poem from memory. You did. Mostly. The library also holds some oddities. A scroll that's half eaten by mice, a clay tablet listing old debts from Ephesus, and one particularly suspicious erotic herbal remedy manual written in what looks like code. You're not allowed to open that one. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, usually late at night, when the house finally sleeps, you read the scrolls for yourself, not out of rebellion, just curiosity. The way someone today might flip through an old photo album they weren't meant to see. One scroll you keep hidden behind a pottery shard near the window. It's a copy of Sappho's Fragments, tender, strange, full of longing. You don't fully understand all of it, but it makes you feel something. And that counts. Of course, not all literate slaves get to stay in the villa. Some are sent with traveling masters as secretaries, carrying writing kits wrapped in waxcloth, ready to jot down military orders, real estate deals, or poetry whenever inspiration inconveniently strikes. You remember one boy who was sent off to Gaul. He didn't even know where Gaul was. Just packed his stylus and hoped the tents had good lighting. They didn't. Back in the present, you realize you smudged ink on your sleeve. Again, the ink comes from a walnut-based Recipe brown, watery and eager to ruin everything you touch. You dip the stylus, write 3 more lines, and rub your cramped fingers. The master doesn't even look up. You want to sigh, but you don't. Instead, you lean back and glance at the rows of scrolls, each one a spiral of human thought, silent. Unless read. You wonder what it would feel like to write something entirely your own. Something signed at the bottom, not with your master's name, but yours, whatever that might be. The study fades behind you, the smell of ink still clinging to your fingertips as you step into the private quarters. The walls here are painted with gentle scenes of pastoral myths, nymphs chasing goats, Apollo reclining under an olive tree butt. You barely notice anymore. You're on your way to help prepare the master for his daily public appearance, and by prepare, we mean scrub, tweeze, oil, and deodorize him to Roman perfection. You are now deep in the domain of grooming slaves, unsung artisans of armpit tweezing, heel scraping, and hair oiling. A place where hygiene meets theater, and you, lucky you, get to wield the razor. Your master is reclining in his bathrobe, already halfway through his morning honey cake, and waiting for you to start the routine. He yawns. You do not. First comes the depilation. That's a fancy word for removing hair that might offend the delicate sensibilities of the toga-wearing elite. You apply warm wax beeswax melted in a little bronze pan and mixed with crushed lavender and begin the gentle, rhythmic rip. Not too fast. That earned a complaint last week. Not too slow, or he starts reading poetry out loud. You can't win. Underarms, arms, the back of the neck, and sometimes even toes. Romans didn't like to be hairy, at least not visibly. You once overheard a guest describe another man as foresty, and the room fell silent with scandal. Historians still argue whether all these grooming rituals were based in hygiene or fashion or both. Some scrolls suggest it was religious purity. Others, just plain vanity. Either way, it meant work for you. And hot wax for everyone. Then come the tweezers. Forged in iron, delicately curved, and absolutely unforgiving. You squat beside the master's couch, plucking stray hairs from his brows. He flinches. You apologize. He flinches again. You stop apologizing. It's a whole ritual of subtle winces and passive-aggressive sighs. Next, the unguentum-scented oil made from crushed rose petals, cinnamon bark, and a dash of imported myrrh. You dab it gently across his temples, neck, and wrists using a strip of soft wool. He smells like a garden. You smell like wax and resignation. He asks you to describe his best side. You say left, because yesterday you said right. And he didn't like that. The master then holds out his hands for a manicure filed with a pumice stone and smoothed with a mixture of vinegar and oyster shell powder. He once asked for moon-shaped nails, claiming it would make a statement in court. You didn't ask what statement. There's a box beside you containing everything you might need. Tiny ivory-handled razors, tweezers, a jar of ground chalk for whitening teeth, a sponge soaked in rose water, and something the mistress insists on, a small pot of fig paste she believes prevents wrinkles. You're not sure it works, but she's been 28 for the last 10 years, so maybe there's magic in there after all. Of course, not all grooming tasks are so dignified. Some involve dealing with lice, others callous shaving. Once, a guest requested that his feet be lightly perfumed with fennel water for confidence. You nodded and complied, because arguing with someone holding grapes and a small dagger is never wise. You're interrupted by the entrance of another slave, a tonsor, the hair trimmer. He's older, stoic, and carries his shears like a priest, bearing sacred instruments. The master sits, and the ritual continues. Hair is snipped, sideburns leveled, and the usual debate begins over whether curls look more Greek or heroic. You whisper that a bit of gray is showing. The master frowns. You suggest a rinse of walnut dye. He approves. You rush to prepare the mixture: smashed green walnut husks boiled in vinegar, strained through a linen rag. It stains the fingers for days, but it gets the job done. While the dye sets, you polish his sandals. The soles are lined with soft felt, and the straps gleam like bronze. He insists they squeak when he walks so others notice. You once offered to oil them. He said, then what would be the point of sandals? You're starting to understand the layers of Roman vanity. They weren't subtle. But then again, subtlety doesn't get you noticed in the forum. As the final step, the master turns to you and lifts his chin. Time for the face patting. You apply a fine dusting of ground pearls mixed with starch, a kind of ancient mattifying powder to reduce shine. You use a feather for this. He insists on it. Outside, the household begins to stir in earnest. Chariots rattle past. A dog barks. Somewhere a baker shouts about fresh loaves. Inside, you bow slightly, hand the master his polished bronze mirror, and wait. He nods approval. You breathe. And just as you begin packing up your grooming kit, he adds, the armpit felt rushed today. Try slower tomorrow. Of course, you scrape the wax pot clean, wipe your hands on a scrap of linen, and leave the room smelling like success, sweat, and 10 types of oil. The next client is waiting, the mistress's sister, who believes in cucumber juice facials and regularly asks you to massage her temples until her dreams feel aligned. You haven't aligned a dream yet, but you're trying. The scent of fig paste and rose oil trails behind you as you pad down the hallway, careful not to step on the tiny bronze offering bowls lining the foot of each statue. The villa is humming, now messengers darting, servants shouting just below. A whisper, sandals slapping against cool marble. But you? You're headed somewhere quieter, stranger, more personal. You turn a corner, duck beneath an archway, and enter the sleeping quarters. This is the domain of the cubicularius, the bedroom. Slave. And tonight, that's you. It's a job that sounds simple. Assist the master or mistress in the bedroom. But this isn't about fluffing pillows or changing sheets. No, it's a delicate, shadowy role of whispered instructions, precise timing, and quiet exits. The cubicularius is the last to see the master at night, and often the first to see him in the morning. You've woken him from nightmares, smoothed his tunic before dawn meetings, and once helped him count the stars through the open roof to soothe his nerves. Your current master is particular. He sleeps on a low couch of cedar wood, imported from Lebanon, with a pillow stuffed with goose feathers, not duck, never duck. His blanket is woven wool from Britannia. His bedroom is dim, decorated in dark greens and ochres, and he likes it quiet enough to hear the oil lamp flicker. But before sleep, there is the routine. You enter softly. No sandals. You bring with you a small tray, warm milk steeped with cardamom, a damp cloth for wiping the day from his hands, and a stylus in case inspiration strikes in the half-sleep. He sits upright, reading from a tablet. You wait. He glances up. Did you prepare the dream incense? You nod. Of course you did. It's a blend of poppy seed, lavender, and crushed date pits. You place it gently into the bronze censer and light it with a coal pulled from the kitchen. Fire. It smokes sweetly, curling like snakes around the furniture legs. Leave the window half open, he says. You do. A cool breeze flows in. Somewhere an owl hoots. You count 5 wing beats. You always count. You help him remove his rings, 7 of them, each with its own pouch. Then the belt. Then the hairpiece. Yes, hairpiece. He insists it's a family heirloom, though you suspect otherwise. You set everything neatly on the cedar shelf. Tell me something boring, he mutters. Reclining. You think for a moment. There's a mold that grows only on the lower tiles of the communal baths. It smells faintly of wet chalk and fish. He sighs. Perfect. Historians still argue whether bedroom slaves were trusted confidants or just conveniently present. Some letters suggest they were sources of gossip. Others treat them like walking wardrobes. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. You know his habits better than he does. He scratches his left eyebrow when he's lying. He hums when he dreams. And every few weeks he wakes suddenly, asking if the calendar has changed, because he's convinced the priests are cheating time. You tuck the blanket around him, not too snug. You once tried tight folds and he panicked in his sleep. Like, "A mummy," he'd shouted. That was awkward. Your job doesn't end when he falls asleep. You sit by the door on a small stool, wrapped in a wool shawl, and wait. In case he wakes. In case he calls out. In case he decides he wants to recite Catullus at 2 a.m., which has happened. Twice. Sometimes you watch the shadows play on the painted ceiling. You make up stories about them. That one looks like a sailing ship. That one, a bird in flight. That one might be a spider. You'll check later. He shifts in his sleep. You rise, pour a bit more milk, and place it on the side table. He won't drink it, but if it's not there, he'll ask why. There's an old superstition in Rome that your dreams are shaped by who's in the room when you fall asleep. You wonder, sometimes, if he dreams your face, or if you simply vanish behind his eyes like the furniture or the stone walls. The oil lamp flickers. You adjust the wick. The poppy incense fades. You brush a bit of ash from the floor with the edge of your sleeve. You're tired, but not in the way sleep solves. You're the keeper of someone else's peace. A shadow watching over another person's comfort. A human bookmark in the long, slow pages of a Roman night. Once, you dozed off in this chair. Just once. You were woken by the master's gentle cough and the stern reminder, a cubicularist does not snore. You apologized and meant it, because in this strange corner of the Roman household, sleep isn't rest. It's responsibility, a performance, an unbroken line of presence. He stirs again. You glance up. Did you bolt the door? He mumbles. Yes, you whisper. He exhales and drifts off again. You lean back. Stretch your toes. The stool creaks. And still, you sit. The night is long. But you are longer. By the time the bedroom begins to brighten with the first sleepy streaks of dawn, you've already slipped away quiet as a cat crossing wet tiles and headed toward the back of the villa. It's warm here, warm and loud. A different kind of energy pulses through the stone walls, and the air tastes like garlic, smoke, and sizzling fat. Welcome to the kitchen, where Roman cuisine is both an art form and a battlefield, and where slaves like you make culinary magic while trying very hard not to sneeze in the garum. This is where the cokie cooks and their underlings work from before sunrise until long after the last fig tart is served. You're not the head cook, but you're close enough to the action to get splattered by boiling lentil stew and yelled at for over-toasting the commandant today. You're assigned to seasoning duty. You grab your mortar and pestle carved from volcanic stone and heavier than a senator's ego, and begin grinding peppercorns and dried mint into a fine powder. Beside you, another slave is preparing liquamen, that beloved fermented fish sauce. It smells like if Neptune himself forgot to shower for a week. You've grown used to it. Your tools are humble. Bronze knives, clay pots, wooden spoons blackened at the edges. There's no silverware back here. That's for the dining room. You use your hands, your elbows, sometimes your sleeve when the spoon falls behind the hearth. But the food you produce? Fit for an emperor. Your master's family prefers the Apician style named after the famously decadent Roman gourmand. That means spices, sauces, and more sauces. Honeyed dormice stuffed with pine nuts, lentils with coriander and vinegar, fruit soaked in wine and roasted over olive coals until caramelized and dripping, and it's your job to keep it all from burning, while also making sure the mistress's parrot doesn't fall into the soup again. It's happened once. The parrot survived. The soup did not. There's no real recipe book, just memory. And the Magister Koki, the kitchen master, who barks. Instructions while waving a ladle like a short sword. More lovage, he yells, less salt. That barley tastes like a brick. Historians still argue whether Roman food was genuinely delicious by today's standards or simply complex for the sake of showing off. What's clear is that Roman cooks had access to an astonishing array of ingredients: black pepper from India, saffron from Spain, figs from Crete, and oysters hauled in fresh from the Bay of Naples. Of course, you don't get to eat most of it. Your meals are simpler spoonfuls of boiled grain, yesterday's leftover beans, a crust of bread if you're lucky. But occasionally, the cook sneaks you a taste. A sliver of honeyed ham, a fig too bruised for the guests. One glorious afternoon, a broken almond cake crust. You nearly wept out the kitchen itself as a marvel of managed chaos. Two hearths blaze at once. Amphorae of wine and vinegar lean against the wall like sleepy soldiers. There's always a pot boiling. Always a sauce reducing. And always, that smell of something just on the edge of burning. You duck under a drying rack of herbs, basil, thyme, rue, and move to chop onions. The knife is dull. Your eyes water. Someone drops a clay jar. It shatters. The head cook sighs so deeply it feels like the whole room exhales. There's a slave here who does nothing but prepare the master's favorite spice blend. All day, every day, she roasts sesame seeds and grinds pepper and dries citrus peel until her hands smell like spice markets and never come clean. She swears she once saw Cicero eat a spoonful of mustard and sneeze so hard he dropped his scroll. You laugh. She doesn't. You help stir the poles, a thick porridge of farro grain and cheese, while watching a young boy slowly fan the coals with a broken goose wing. His job is coal fanner. That's it. That's his whole life right now. Sometimes you wonder how many of these jobs were invented just to keep slaves busy. But then again, running a Roman kitchen was like choreographing a dance with knives. Everyone had to know their place. One wrong step and dinner was ruined, or worse, late. As the sun rises higher, the pace quickens. Bread is pulled from the clay oven, singed at the edges just right. Dates are stuffed with nuts and skewered with rosemary twigs. A slave appears with a list from the mistress requesting a meat pie that won't embarrass her in front of the senator's wife. No pressure. You help wrap fish in fig leaves using thin twine and steady hands. The scent is heavenly. You wish you could save some. You never can doubt then, as quickly as it started, the rush slows. Trays are packed. Slaves with strong arms carry them to the dining room. You wipe your brow with the edge of your tunic and glance down at the floor, which is now speckled with flour, oil, and what may or may not be parrot feathers. Another meal. Another miracle. You know no one will mention your name tonight. They'll praise the flavor, toast the wine, maybe groan over the pomegranates being a bit too tart. But they won't ask who crushed the garlic just right. or who remembered to sweeten the carrot stew with date syrup. Still, in your quiet corner of the villa, you smile, because you made something beautiful today. Tired hands, full heart, empty plate. You barely get time to wipe the flour from your hands before you're whisked off again. This time, toward the airy heart of the household, the open courtyard beyond the peristyle, where columns stretch like stone trees and the sunlight glints off still pools of water. You're not cooking anymore. Today, you're cooling. You're part of a different spectacle now, assigned to one of the more strangely theatrical roles a Roman slave might perform. The flabelliferi, the fan-bearers. Specifically, the ones tasked with keeping senators, magistrates, and pompous uncles from sweating too obviously in the Roman heat. You and a few other unlucky souls hold enormous fans woven from palm fronds and ostrich feathers, and your job is to stand behind seated nobility and keep a breeze moving. Not too fast, not too slow, just ... Pleasantly present. There are no rules. Written down, of course. It's all about the vibe. And guessing the mood of the man in the chair. You're stationed behind your master, today as he hosts a few colleagues from the Senate. They're deep in some convoluted debate about property taxes in the southern provinces, and you're deep in the timeless art of making a stiff breeze look effortless. You move your fan in long, slow arcs. Back and forth, back and forth. Your arms ache already, and it's barely mid-morning. One of the other fan-bearers, a short, wiry girl who fans like she's rowing across the Aegean, glances at you and raises her eyebrows. You respond by slowing your rhythm just enough to look serene. Roman elegance, darling. The man in front of you clears his throat. You fan a bit faster. This isn't just about temperature control. It's a performance. You're part of the background staging that says, this man is important. He doesn't sweat like you do. He doesn't fuss with his collar or wave his own hand. No others do that for him. So yes, in a way, you're air. But like, very flattering. Air. Historians still argue whether the position of fan-bearer originated in Egypt and was adopted by Rome, or whether it developed locally as part of the broader Roman obsession with appearances. Either way, it's oddly enduring. Even in paintings, you'll see them. A proud senator in his finest toga, and behind him, a quietly suffering teenager holding a palm fan bigger than their torso. Sometimes, you're stationed outdoors in the forum during political speeches under the blazing sun. Those days are the worst. The marble reflects heat like a frying pan. You sweat under your tunic while trying to keep a noble's bald head from doing the same. One time, your fan fell mid-flick, just slipped from your hand like a dead fish. The silence that followed was so thick you could have sliced it with a wax tablet. The master turned, raised one eyebrow, said nothing. That was worse than yelling. Today's gathering includes one senator with a long neck and a tendency to shift dramatically every few sentences. You adjust constantly to keep up. The fan is wide, but not that wide. The man turns and catches your eye. Steady rhythm, he says flatly. You're not churning butter. You smile politely and resist the urge to fan him slightly too hard. You think back to a story the kitchen boy once told you, of a fan-bearer who got bored and started spelling rude words with the gusts of his fan, making the senator's hair fluff in alphabetical curls. Probably not true, but it makes you grin anyway. You steady your arms, roll your shoulders subtly, and resume. 1, 2, sweep. 1, 2, sweep. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. There's something peaceful in the repetition. The soft whoosh, the play of light on the marble floor, the murmured Latin. A fly buzzes near your ear and you swat it with perfect fan precision. A bonus. Later, you'll help retrieve the fans, clean the feathers with a damp cloth, and hang them in the storage room where they'll wait, still and perfect, for their next silent performance. But for now, you just move air, gracefully, quietly, like a breeze that knows its place. Eventually, the senators rise, robes rustling, and stroll toward the garden for grapes and arguments about aqueducts. You follow, fan in hand, ready to begin again. And even though no one thanks you, no one ever does, you still take a small pride in the fact that no one today broke a sweat, because you were there. The marble floor cools beneath your soles as you're sent off once again, this time toward the outer courtyards, the less glamorous end of the villa, where the air smells faintly of feathers, old grain, and something else. Sweeter, weirder. You're headed to meet the animals, and no, not the ones for dinner. These are the pets, because despite Rome's harshness, its whippings, its politics, its dramatic dinner party betrayals, there's still room for lapdogs and silver collars and parrots who can recite half of Ovid badly. You push open a creaky side door and step into the shaded menagerie courtyard. The birds are already chirping, the dogs already yapping, and the goat, yes, there's a goat, has somehow gotten into the laundry again. Welcome to the world of animal keepers, Roman slaves, tasked with tending to their masters' exotic menageries. From brightly plumed parrots to tiny yapping dogs, monkeys with attitudes, and the occasional tame mongoose, your job is to feed, brush, clean, and entertain creatures who live better than most citizens. Today you've been assigned to the flamingo. Yes. Singular. Her name is Vesta, and she's about as moody as a sunburned empress. She doesn't like loud noises, sudden movements, or figs that are too ripe. You know all of this because you've been pecked 4 times this week for violating those exact preferences. Vesta lives in a shallow tiled pool in the villa's east courtyard. You clean the tiles every other day. You skim feathers from the water. You arrange pebbles just the way she likes them, rounded, not jagged. She ignores you unless you have shrimp. Feeding her is an art she won't take food from a bowl. You must gently place it in the water and walk away, then peek from behind the myrtle hedge to see if she's accepted it. If she eats, you sigh in relief. If not, you try again with slightly colder shrimp. Or warmer. It depends on her mood. And the phase of the moon. Probably. Historians still argue whether these animal assignments were a sign of favor or simply punishment disguised in feathery cuteness. Some records suggest wealthy Roman women would leave entire fortunes to their lapdogs, while the slaves who cared for them were left out of the will entirely. You once met a parrot who had better jewelry than you. His name was Crispus. He had a tiny silver anklet and an entire cage carved from cedar. He screeched pulchra sum, I'm beautiful, over and over while stealing grapes from passing trays. His keeper had to teach him not to insult guests. It didn't work. There's also Ganymede, the monkey. He's not technically your responsibility, but you've been called in to remove him from the roof 3 times this month. He enjoys stealing laundry and shrieking, like a senator under siege. And let's not forget the lapdogs, tiny puffballs with names like Livia, Papier, and Flufficus. Their fur is brushed daily, their claws trimmed weekly, and their beds lined with dyed wool that matches the mistress's wardrobe. You once had to hand-feed Papia goat's milk from a tiny ceramic thimble because she doesn't like to drink alone. Of course, not every animal gets pampered. Some are working pets like the goose who guards the outer courtyard. She's called Minerva and has better instincts than most of the house guards. If you walk past her too fast, she honks like a war trumpet. You always carry a small bag of seeds to keep her distracted. Your favorite, though, is the tortoise. His name is Brutus, and he lives in a clay pot filled with dirt and lettuce. He moves once every 2 hours, enjoys sunbathing, and has never once bitten you. A true gentleman. There's a quiet bond between you and these creatures. You always watching. Them living obliviously lavish lives. But sometimes you see flashes of understanding, like when the parrot leans its head into your palm, or when Vesta lets you sit beside her pool without hissing. It's small, but it's something. Feeding time is a blur of crumbs, sliced figs, barley mash, and dried insects. You distribute treats with practiced hands, dodging flapping wings and curious snouts. A slave beside you is trying to brush Flufficus, but he keeps rolling over like a dying beetle every time the comb gets near. You catch his eye. You both smirk. Even here, in this soft, feathery part of the household, the rules are strict. You're not to play with the animals, not to name them anything undignified. You're not to let the goat into the garden again. Oops, too late. Still, you manage. And somehow, amid the chaos, you find a moment of peace. Vesta is preening, Brutus is blinking very slowly, and the sun dapples the tiles in warm gold dot. No one will ever write about you in the history scrolls. But the parrot might say your name someday. You leave the animal courtyard behind feathers in your hair, goat fur stuck to your sleeve, and the faint scent of barley mash clinging to your tunic. Your next destination is louder, wetter, and significantly more echoey. You pass under a stone, arch where steam curls like ghostly vines into the open air. Welcome to the Thermae, the private bath complex attached to the villa. Not every household can afford their own, but your master certainly can. And someone has to maintain it. Guess? Who? You are now one of the many nameless hands working behind the fogged-up marble of the Roman balneum, a place where the elite sweat, soak, and socialize while slaves like you scrub, carry, heat, and towel. You start in the caldarium, the hot room. It's already misty from the hypocaust below, a system of underground fires channeled through the floor, heating the stone from beneath. It's a miracle of Roman engineering, and also a fire hazard waiting to happen if you don't rake the coals correctly. Your job begins with checking the temperatures of the basins, not with a thermometer, of course, but with the back of your hand, like your grandmother testing porridge. The water must be hot, but not scalding, warm enough to impress guests, cool enough not to cook them. You help prepare the Strigel's curved bronze scrapers used to remove oil and sweat from the skin. You line them neatly on a tray beside the olive oil flasks. No soap here, thank you very much. Oil goes on first, then Strigils scrape it all off. Cleanliness, Roman style. The first bathers arrive, voices booming through the fog. They don't look at you. They rarely do. You take up your usual spot near the towels. You're the towel boy today, which means keeping track of who owns which. Wool cloth, folding them in the correct order, and making sure no one mistakes a senator's towel for a merchant's. That happened last week. There were ... words. Your fellow slave leans over and whispers. 5 sesterces as the old consul drops his soap again. You both try not to laugh. You assist where needed, holding sandals, handing off water jugs, cleaning a comb left floating mysteriously in the tepid air pool. You mop up puddles, gather fallen hair, and make sure no one slips on the still wet tile. One guest, very proud of his own biceps, once slipped and blamed the towel. You got the lecture. Historians still argue whether the bath attendants were trained for their roles or simply thrown in and expected to adapt. You suspect it's the latter. No one trained you. You learn by not getting yelled at. There's also a kind of choreography to it all. Guest enters. You offer a light robe. He disrobes. You gather garments in the correct order. Robe, tunic, sash, sandals never mess up the order. Then he walks into the mist like a soldier heading to war, and you hustle to the next guest. Sometimes you're asked to massage shoulders. With oil, with ground pumice, with enthusiasm, even if the guest smells like old cheese and disappointment. Today, you help a young man wrap his foot, bruised from gladiator training. He complains dramatically. You nod sympathetically and gently. Dab his toe. He thanks you. That's rare. You tuck that away in your memory like a shiny pebble. You also tend to the bath oil's delicate blends kept in glass jars. Bay laurel, lavender, even cinnamon for those trying to impress. The master's favorite is a blend of clove and myrrh. You refill it before he even asks. That earns a grunt of approval. That's basically a standing ovation in this job. Eventually, the guests move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The part no one likes, but everyone pretends to. You're ready with towels, sandals, and the ability to look away politely when someone shrieks from the cold. Your day ends with cleanup. You sweep fallen petals from the bath edges. There was a rose-scented soaking earlier, and scrub the floor. With a reed brush dipped in vinegar water, your knees ache. Your fingers are pruny. Your tunic smells like 5 different strangers. Still, there's something serene about the steam. The rhythm of scraping strigils, the echoes bouncing softly. Off stone. You've made this space clean, calming, functional. No one notices, but they would if you didn't dot as you fold the final towel and place it on the heated shelf. You pause for a moment. The light is dim. The bath is still. Just for a heartbeat. It's yours, then someone calls for more oil, and the moment is gone. Back to work. You dry your hands on the edge of your tunic as you sent out of the bath complex, your muscles humming from all the mopping and bending. You've barely taken 5 steps before a familiar voice calls your name. Well, not your name exactly, but the one they gave you when you arrived in this household. Get the seat ready, he barks. Ah yes. Today, you're on chair duty, which means you've become one of the villa's celery chair bearers, stool porters, walking convenience. Made human. Because in Rome, comfort isn't something you go to, it's something that comes with you, even if it has legs. Especially if it has legs. You hurry to the side storage room where the folding stool is kept. It's made of polished wood, inlaid with brass, and collapses like a stubborn crab. The leather seat has been softened by decades of important bottoms, and the hinges squeak just enough to annoy you. You heft it onto your shoulder, adjust the strap that keeps it from swinging into your knee, and head toward the atrium. Your master is already striding out the door, robe trailing dramatically, trailed by a few clients and a rather impatient-looking philosopher. He doesn't break stride as he says, "To the forum, and don't fall behind." Of course, so now, you're a mobile furniture unit. Your job is to keep pace, stay close, and be ready to unfold the stool the instant your master decides he's had enough standing. Which can happen at any time. In the street, in a shop, outside a bakery, or, famously, in the middle of a speech on grain tariffs where he once flopped into the chair mid-sentence and declared, "Let the truth sit with me. You weren't allowed to laugh, but you did." Quietly, you jog behind him now, dodging carts, shouting children, and the occasional goat. The stool is heavier in the sun. You feel the sweat gathering beneath your arms, trickling down your back. The philosopher behind you glares every time you jostle his scrolls. Finally, the group pauses in the form room's buzzing heart, stalls. Shout about olives. Coins clink. A mime pretends to be a chicken. You don't even flinch anymore. Your master stops, nods. You spring into action, flipping the stool open in one fluid motion. He sits, sighs, wipes his brow with a linen square you hand him. There's a rhythm to it. He speaks. You stand nearby, holding his flask of water, adjusting the stool if it shifts on the uneven stones, and trying very hard not to look like you're eavesdropping. Historians still argue whether the celery were chosen for strength, speed, or simply endurance. Some believe they were ranked, like charioteers, with the fastest and most reliable earning favor. Others say the role was considered mildly humiliating after all. What's more remang than assigning someone to be your personal bench? You're not alone. Other chair bearers stand nearby, some holding ornate folding thrones, others with simpler stools. You nod at one, a tall boy with arms like marble columns. He raises his brows as if to say, "Another long day?" You nod. Back. Your master rises. Another speech finished, another conversation about irrigation completed. You fold the stool and sling it over your back once more. He waves at a merchant, walks briskly into the crowd, and you follow, weaving between statues, over cobblestones, through clouds of dust and the scent of fresh bread. You're stopped only once by a child who points at the stool and asks, "Is that his throne?" You smile and say, "Only when he's tired." You eventually return to the villa just as the sun dips low. Your arms ache. Your tunic clings to your ribs. The stool is heavier now, somehow. The philosopher didn't say a word the whole walk home, but you caught him eyeing your footwork. Maybe he'll write a scroll about you, on the virtue of portable. Seating. Once inside, you wipe down the stool with a damp cloth. You polish the brass corners. You fold it precisely and place it in the alcove reserved for items of repose. The name makes you smirk, and then you lean against the wall for a moment. Just one breath. Just 1 second of stillness. Because today you were a chair. Tomorrow, who knows? A candle snuffer, a lemon squeezer, a personal towel. But for now, you're off duty. And that stool, ridiculous as it may be, didn't collapse under anyone today. That's a win. You're resting your feet for what feels like a luxurious full minute when you hear the telltale clatter of sandal soles in a hurry and the breathless words, "The guests are coming early." You sigh, roll your shoulders, and brace yourself. Tonight is a private dinner, wealthy, boisterous, and for you, theatrical. Literally, you're performing, or rather being made to perform. Because tonight you serve not as cleaner or carrier, but as part of the household's private entertainment ensemble. You are, for the next few hours, a hilarious, a jester, mimic, or comic performer. Or, depending on how the mood goes, the evenings. Scapegoat in sandals. You're ushered into the triclinium, the formal dining room where guests are already arriving. The couches are arranged in a U-shape, and the air is thick with perfume, roasted duck, and the palpable buzz of high expectations. You've been prepped by the steward. Keep it light. No impressions of the mistress this time. And absolutely no donkey jokes. Noted. You start with something tame, a short skit involving exaggerated walks that imitate various Roman officials. The guests chuckle. The master sips his wine, watching. You like a hawk in a toga. Then comes the mime act. A silent reenactment of his last visit to the baths, complete with overdramatic towel mishaps and the universally relatable tragedy of stepping on a cold tile. You earn a genuine laugh. This job is absurd, exhausting, and strangely exhilarating. You've never trained in theater. Most of your knowledge comes from watching actual performers in the street, borrowing their gestures, their timing, their posture. But somehow, you make it work. Sometimes you're handed a lute and asked to sing. You're not great at singing. You are, however, excellent at making up ridiculous verses about daily villa life. Tonight's hit, a song about the kitchen parrot who learned to insult the wine steward. It gets a round of applause. One guest, slightly tipsy, asks for an impression of the emperor. You freeze. The room goes quiet. Then you hold up a grape like a laurel crown, puff out your cheeks, and mumble about taxes. A beat of silence. Then, laughter. Your master claps once permission granted. You breathe again. Historians still argue whether these in-house comic slaves were true artists or just tools of humiliation. Some were prized for their wit and agility. Others were mocked, dressed in absurd costumes and made to entertain on command like pets with punchlines. You've seen both kinds. You've been both kinds. Tonight, you're lucky. The crowd is warm, the wine is flowing, and no one throws a date pit at your head. You move into impressions, imitating the cook shouting at the bread boy, the cloak holder trying to catch a falling sandal mid-bow, the master pacing before a speech. Each caricature lands with a satisfying chuckle. You are not, however, allowed to sit. Even when the guests recline into their third course, honeyed pastries and fig-stuffed nuts, you stand at the side, ready to launch into another joke, another absurd tale. You've memorized half of Menander's plays, though you tweak the endings. No one likes a downer before dessert. Once, you performed an entire shadow puppet play using only your hands and the light from an oil lamp. It was supposed to be a quiet interlude. It ended in a reenactment of a military campaign gone wrong, featuring a heroic pigeon. You received a leftover pastry as a thank you. You treasured it. As the evening winds on, the crowd grows louder, looser. A guest insists you mime the daily life of a philosopher. You stroke an imaginary beard, trip over invisible scrolls, and mutter dramatically to the ceiling. Roars of laughter follow. You grin. It's not a bad night. Still, you never forget what this is. Performance, yes, but also power. You walk a razor's edge between entertaining and offending, and you never know when the master's smile will tighten. You once saw another performer good, quick-witted banished for a joke that was too clever, too sharp, a bit too true. So you play it safe. Mostly, your final act is a tableau of villa life using spoons and napkins as props. The guests are delighted. Someone drops a fig. No one notices. Finally, the steward nods. Your cue to fade. You bow low, careful not to make it theatrical. That was last month's mistake, and exit quietly. Back in the service quarters, you let the smile drop. Your cheeks ache. Your feet are sore. You're hoarse from mimicking goat herders and bathhouse brawls, but you made them laugh. That's something. You hang up the props, a borrowed cloak, a fake laurel crown, and wipe the sweat from your brow. Tomorrow you'll be back to hauling buckets or folding towels. But tonight, for a brief shimmering moment, you were the center of the Roman universe. And all it cost you was your dignity, your energy, and your best donkey joke. You've barely stepped off the makeshift stage if a corner of the triclinium and a wine-stained cushion can be called a stage when someone grabs your shoulder. Not roughly, but firmly. Come, he's going out tonight. You know what that means. Tonight you're not a lamplighter or a fan bearer or even a reluctant performer. Tonight you are a body slave, but more than that. You're doubling as something unofficial and highly valued, a bodyguard. Because even a Roman nobleman, puffed full of wine and pride, knows the streets of Rome after dark aren't always paved with poetry. And while they may not trust the plebs, they do trust you. Or at least trust you'll take the first dagger if something goes wrong. Say you change tunics. Thicker fabric. A concealed dagger slid into the fold, technically forbidden, but quietly tolerated. A leather belt with a pouch that jingles just enough to say, I'm prepared, but not enough to say, I'm rich. It's all a game of balance. The master is preparing to visit a friend's domus across the city. He's brought gifts, 2 scrolls, a bottle of Falernian wine, and a gold coin that he plans to lose casually in a dice game. You carry the parcel and walk precisely 1 pace behind, just close enough to intercept a hand, just far enough not to embarrass him. As you walk through Rome's lamplit streets, past graffitied walls and the shuttered stalls of fruit vendors, you stay alert. Your eyes scan the corners. You know this route well. You've memorized the shortcuts, the alleys that flood, the places where shadows gather a little too thickly, and you know who to look for. Pickpockets, drunken gladiators, angry neighbors, Once, a runaway goat caused more havoc than any thief. But tonight feels quiet, which is sometimes worse. The master talks as he walks more to himself than to you. He mutters about Senate politics, the grain shortage, someone's new villa that looks too Greek. You nod at the right moments, grunt occasionally, and once or twice offer a neutral indeed. He doesn't need your opinion, just your presence. Historians still argue whether slave bodyguards were common or reserved for the wealthy elite. Some records mention trusted slaves who followed their masters into battle or helped them escape assassination attempts. One scroll even describes a slave who tackled an angry camel mid-market. No one explains why the camel was angry. Tonight, thankfully, there are no camels. You arrive at the domus. Your master greets his host with exaggerated warmth. You remain by the entrance, arms folded, one foot slightly forward, what the guards call a ready but bored posture. You're offered water by a kitchen slave. You accept with a nod. She recognizes you from the bathhouse. You both pretend not to dot while the nobles feast. You and the other attendants wait near the vestibule. You trade a few quiet stories. One man says his master dreams aloud about war strategies involving sheep. Another says he once had to carry his master home in a laundry basket. You all chuckle. Quietly. Then movement. Your master stumbles out, full of wine and poor judgment. He waves off the offered litter. We'll walk. He declares. Of course you will. So back into the night you go. This time with him singing a song about Saturn that, frankly, makes no sense. He leans on your shoulder, not out of affection, but because the street just developed a dramatic slope under his feet. You hold him up, quietly, without pride. Like furniture. Then you hear it. Footsteps. Quick. From the left. You don't panic. You shift your position subtly, putting yourself between the master and the sound. A figure appears from the alley. Beggar. Just passing. You nod. He nods. The moment passes, but for a heartbeat, you are ready. That's your job. Ready, always. Ready to shield, to absorb, to act, fast and without hesitation. You finally reach the villa gates. You help the master inside, unlace his sandals, catch the scroll he nearly drops, and guide him to his chair. He mumbles a thanks. That might have been meant for you. Or the wine. You don't mind. You report to the steward. No incidents, you say. He nods. Hands you a small cloth bundle, a piece of bread with olive tapenade, payment in quiet gratitude. You eat it slowly, alone by the servant's well. It's the best thing you've had all day. And as the night deepens, you think about how strange your job really is. You're not the biggest, not the strongest, but you're the one they trust to walk with power and deflect danger, because you know the city, you know its shadows, and you know how to keep a drunk aristocrat alive with nothing more than calm eyes and a steady hand. Not all armor is metal. Sometimes it's just knowing where to stand. It's morning again. You can tell not because you've slept, you haven't, but because the birds have started their screeching opera in the roof tiles, and the courtyard smells like warm dew and yesterday's bread crusts. Today, you're being sent beyond the villa, out past the tiled streets and painted walls, beyond the fountains and bustling bathhouses, and into the countryside. The estate's vineyards need more hands, and yours, apparently, are not currently assigned. You're now part of the agricultural machine, a field slave. Specifically, you've been placed among the grape pickers, those lucky souls who spend their hours bent beneath the sun, trimming vines, sorting leaves, and trying not to step on anything venomous. The vineyard sits on a gentle hill. It's beautiful in the abstract rows of vines trailing down the slope, cicadas buzzing in the grass, distant plumes of smoke from breakfast fires. But for you, it's mostly just hot. The overseer greets you with the enthusiasm of a man who believes in yelling as a management style. He waves a crook stick and shouts instructions that everyone already knows. Don't bruise the grapes. Mind the baskets. Watch the wasps. You grab your curved knife, a Falx Venatoria, and join the line. The work is quiet, rhythmic. Snip, drop, sort. You slide bunches into your woven basket, careful not to crush them. The vines scratch at your arms. Your back starts to complain. You keep going. You're paired with an older man named Felix. Not his real name, he says, but the one that stuck. He hums tunelessly as he works and claims to know which vines produce the sweetest grapes. This one, he whispers, snipping. A bunch grew near a buried idol. Tastes like mystery. You nod. Every vineyard has its superstitions. One woman insists the wine is better if the first grapes are harvested barefoot. Another swears by singing to the vines off-key love songs preferably. No one stops her. The grapes seem to like it. Historians still argue whether slaves on Roman farms were always treated worse than urban slaves. Some records suggest brutal conditions, chained workers, long days, cruel punishments. Others mention more lenient estates where field slaves formed tight-knit communities and passed down songs, jokes, even herbal remedies. You suspect both are true. On this estate, there's a bit of everything. Some supervisors crack jokes. Others crack whips. Today's overseer mostly cracks walnuts between his teeth and spits the shells at ants. You work through the morning sun, pausing only to sip watered wine from a clay jug passed around. It tastes like vinegar and hope. Still, it's wet. You drink at midday. You're reassigned this time to help with the mustum collection, gathering crushed grape juice from the treading vats. The vats are carved from stone, stained dark with years of harvests. Two men are inside, stomping with surprising rhythm, like a dance choreographed by sore ankles. You collect the juice in small clay jars and carry them to the storage jars, huge. Round-bellied amphorae half buried in the earth for cooling. The juice sloshes. You try not to spill. The amphorae have names scratched into them. Juliana, Felix, Newman. You wonder who named them. You wonder if you'll get one someday. After the juice run, it's back to the vines. This time, sorting leaves, trimming excess. Growth. You find a wasp nest tucked under one broad leaf and very nearly add some drama to the afternoon. Felix flicks it away with a branch, muttering, "Tell no one." There's a kind of camaraderie here, even if no one says it aloud. In the shared grunts, the past bread crusts, the way someone hums a tune and others join in quietly. You learn the rhythm of the vines, the slope of the hill, the sound grapes make when they land just right in the basket. You also learn to spot the supervisor before he spots you. That helps as the sun begins to fall, golden and soft across the rows. You gather the tools and help carry the last baskets to the press. The scent of crushed grape skins hangs in the air, sweet, sharp, almost fizzy. It clings to your tunic. Your hands are stained purple. Your feet itch. You sit for a moment on the edge of a terrace, watching the light melt into the horizon. A donkey brays somewhere behind you. A bird dives through the vines. The world tilts gently toward night. You stretch your back and think about tomorrow. About more vines, more baskets, more juice. But also about the quiet beauty of it all. The absurd serenity of being part of something that will be bottled, sipped, and praised by people who will never know your name. But that wine? It will know your hands. You return from the vineyard just after twilight, sticky with grape juice and dust, your arms trembling in that peculiar way they do after hours of repetitive work. The villa is glowing again, lamps flickering through the windows, the faint sound of laughter spilling from the dining hall, the aroma of cinnamon and roasted goat curling into the air like a soft hand inviting you back into civilization. But tonight, your assignment isn't dinner service or stool carrying or parrot. Feeding, You're headed to the temple. Not the grand marble temples of Jupiter or Mars that tower over the forum, no. This is the private household lararium, the family shrine tucked into a corner alcove of the atrium, right beside the impluvium where water gathers like a reflective coin from the open sky above. And here, another kind of slave labors. Religious attendant. That's you now. You carry a wicker tray filled with ritual items, incense cones, barley grains, tiny terracotta statuettes of the household gods. You set the tray beside the shrine and light the oil lamp at its base. It casts a dancing glow on the painted figures above, Lares and Penedes, their painted eyes calm and unfazed, as though they've seen every ridiculous thing this household has done and are beyond surprised. You clean the marble slab carefully with a soft cloth dipped in rose water. You sweep away the burnt remains of yesterday's offerings, 3 raisins, a half-bitten fig, and a curious dried flower the youngest daughter left because it looked lucky. You don't question luck. You just dust it off gently and move. On the master appears, draped in his evening cloak, holding a small clay dish of wine. He nods. You step back, head bowed, and he whispers the usual prayers blessings for health, protection, maybe a little help with tomorrow's tax hearing. You add a pinch of frankincense to the flame. It hisses, flares briefly, and releases a scent that reminds you of temples in the countryside, cool, quiet, filled with drowsy bees and stone floors cold beneath your knees. Historians still argue how many slaves were involved in private Roman religious rites. Some were trained to memorize incantations. Others were simply expected to sweep the shrine, polish the god's feet, and not sneeze on the offerings. A few like you tonight handled the sacred animals. Yes, the sacred animals. Tonight, it's a goose. A plump, arrogant creature named Septima, whose job is to guard the shrine and occasionally hiss at inappropriate moments. You coax her from her nesting box with a handful of barley, gently guide her to her perch, and try not to flinch when she side-eyes you with judgment. You light the secondary lamp, a tiny bronze thing shaped like a dolphin. Its wick smokes and smells faintly of cloves. You whisper a simple phrase, not an official prayer, just a habit. Don't let me drop anything tonight, because tomorrow is offering day. Once a month, the villa performs a bigger ritual, complete with garlands, dried fruits, and sometimes even a bit of meat if the household is feeling particularly pious or competitive with the neighbors. Job is to prepare the garlands, looping flower stems, bay leaves, and strips of colored wool into circular tokens of devotion. You remember the last garland unraveled mid-offering and the way the mistress sighed like her honor had just been insulted by Jupiter himself. So tonight, you test the wool knots. Twice. Once the prayers are said and the incense burned, the master leaves. He forgets the dish of wine on the edge of the shrine. You carefully pour it into the offering bowl, wiping the edge clean. You've learned it's better that way. You sit for a moment beside the shrine, watching the goose settle, the flame flicker, the smoke curl into the open roof like a message slowly finding its way to the gods. There's something quiet about religious service. A stillness. A rhythm that doesn't involve yelling or lifting or pretending to be a senator with a squeaky voice. You like this part. Even if no one notices, you hear footsteps. The mistress appears, carrying a small ceramic box. She nods at you, places the box in front of the shrine, and whispers something under her breath. You catch only the word safe and the name of her daughter. She leaves. You stay, because even prayers need dusting. You collect the spent incense, straighten the wine, dish, and adjust the tiny statue of Mercury, who's leaning forward like he's eavesdropping. You give him a polite nudge. He straightens up. Before you go, you feed Septima one more handful of barley. She honks softly. You take it as a thank you, or a warning, or both. The lamps are low now. The air smells of ash, herbs, and something. Gently divine. You carry the tray of spent offerings back to the storage room. Tomorrow you'll scrub the bowls, refill the oil, polish the copper stand. Tonight you offer the gods a little order, a little peace. And in return, maybe, just maybe they'll keep the parrot from biting the magistrate's nephew next week. The house is quiet now. The last guest has stumbled out, singing a love song to someone's sandals, and the kitchen fires have dulled to soft embers. A few oil lamps remain lit, casting a golden haze along the corridors. You should be asleep or at least somewhere lying flat, but instead, you've been summoned for inventory duty. Specifically, tonight's job is one that makes your back ache just thinking about it. Updating the household inventory scrolls, not the fine dishware. Not the guest robes. No, this task is ... personal. You'll be cataloging the slaves. You follow the steward into the tablinum, the house's record room. He carries a large scroll, partially unrolled and heavy with notations. The ink is smudged in places. There's a tray of wax tablets for temporary notes and a bowl of dried figs, which he ignores but you eye longingly. Start with the main household, he mutters. He means people. Specifically, the human beings legally considered property within these walls listed like furniture, recorded with disturbing precision. Name or assigned name, age, function, origin, estimated value. You begin with the stable hands, then kitchen staff, then grooming slaves, then children. Yes, even the children. There's a baby in the nursery, barely able to hold its own head up, listed as potential nursemaid. Value? To be reassessed after age 10. You don't flinch at this. You've learned not to. Next, yourself. Your name appears midway down the scroll. The letters are faded, but the description is unmistakable. Male, mid-20s, literate, multipurpose, minor scarring, obedient. You raise an eyebrow. That's one way to describe surviving a goose attack. The steward drones on, occasionally asking questions. Is Crispus still doing mime work or now kitchen cleanup? Has Dacia been reassigned from loom to lamp duty? Did someone report that the parrot keeper has a limp? You nod. You answer. You scribble. Then you reach a strange entry. Lucilla, the scroll reads, Greek, decorative, preferred for guest visibility. You pause. Decorative? She's one of the hallway slaves. Her job is to stand quietly near the atrium during formal visits, wearing a dyed tunic and a wreath in her hair. Smile when spoken to. Say little. Be charming, but not too charming. It's a role with no task, just presence. And yet here she is, recorded alongside chamber pots and furniture polish. You feel something flicker in your chest, but you keep writing. Historians still argue whether the practice of listing enslaved people in inventories alongside objects was purely administrative or part of a deeper dehumanization strategy. The Romans certainly didn't seem to separate function from flesh. If you served wine and held a fan, you might be listed between a jug and a chair. Speaking of chairs, you turn to a passage labeled Mobile Seating. There it is again. The folding stool you carried through the forum 2 days ago. Portable, cedar and brass, seat fabric replaced, see Tiberius, assigned bearer, Maros. That's you. You are, quite literally, listed under furniture. There's even a note. Do not assign Marus to perfume duty again. Caused rash. You laugh, quietly. You work through the night, copying notes onto fresh wax tablets. You correct a mislabeling a lamp slave listed as a scroll runner. You update the age of a cook who somehow remained 29 for the last 8 years. Then you reach the final section, inheritances. A few of the household slaves are listed in the master's will, not freed. just passed along, like heirloom goblets. One is marked for my son to remember the taste of proper cooking. Another, to my brother, he likes the sarcastic one. You wince, recognizing the name. There's a final page a list of those considered sentimental. Slaves too old or too specialized to sell, but too familiar to discard. The steward pauses here, reading over your shoulder. My mother listed one once, he says, a nursemaid. Couldn't remember her name, just wrote warm hands, he shrugs. Still got passed down. Still worked. You nod out, you roll the scroll carefully, wrap it in linen, and tuck it back into the cedar case. The steward leaves you with the wax tablets to finalize. You sit alone now, in the hush of the house, surrounded by names, so many names. Written like tools, maintained like candles, counted like coins. You take a deep breath. The oil lamp beside you flutters slightly. The flame, too, seems tired that you write the last word. Press the tablet closed. Stretch your fingers, and for a moment, just one quiet moment, you wonder what your line in someone. Scroll will say someday. The villa rests in stillness now. Even the birds have quieted, tucked into their corners under the tiled eaves, their feathers fluffed against the night chill. Somewhere deep in the kitchen, a spoon slides lazily from a bowl and lands with a soft clink no one will hear until morning. The oil lamps flicker gently. Shadows stretch long across the atrium floor, curling into the marble cracks like vines. Seeking sleep, you stretch your legs slowly, feeling every muscle soften. The cool of the stone under your heel, the warmth of the wax tablet resting in your lap. Even the scratch of the stylus against your fingertips begins to fade into a kind of hush. You lean back against the wall, head tilting just enough to feel the smooth stone behind you. The silence thickens, tender and velvety, wrapping itself around the pillars and over the sleeping statues. The gods are quiet tonight. The goose is asleep. Even the parrot, somewhere in the dark, has finally stopped announcing its own beauty. And you, tired, sore, unnoticed, are still here. But you've lit the lamps, held the cloaks, fanned the air, danced the mimes, counted the heads, tucked in the prayers. You folded into every corner of this place, quietly, patiently, skillfully. And now, with the house dreaming and the night deepening, you finally let yourself exhale. Let the silence hold you. Let your thoughts drift like smoke. Let the gods, the grapevines, the parrot, and even the scrolls all rest. You've done enough for one day. And now, it's time to sleep.